Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Today we'll venture into the hidden corners of magic, where the most difficult and mysterious spells reside. These magical practices are not only rare, they demand immense strength of spirit, deep preparation, and sometimes sacrifice. Get comfortable. We're about to embark on a journey through the most challenging paths of magical mastery. Enjoy the video. Number 1. Creating horcruxes. Dark magic rarely reveals all its secrets, and the creation of a horcrux is a prime example. J.K. Rowling deliberately left this process shrouded in darkness. Only one thing is known: to create a horcrux, one must commit murder, an act that splits the soul and shatters its wholeness. But murder is only the beginning. To complete the ritual, the wizard must perform a dark spell that extracts a fragment of the soul and binds it into a prepared object. The choice of object depends on the will of the wizard, and the more meaningful the vessel, the stronger the bond between it and its new master. The emotional toll is indescribably high. A wizard who chooses this path loses more than just part of their soul. They lose their humanity, and the way back becomes nearly impossible. Creating a horcrux is not just an act of dark magic. It is a road to self-destruction. Number 2. Animagus transformation. To transform into an animal, it sounds like a dream. But in the magical world, everything comes at a price. Animagus transformation is one of the rarest and most difficult magical feats. Only a handful have ever achieved it. In the 20th century, just 7 official animagi were registered, and only 4 dared to become unregistered: James Potter, Sirius Black, Peter Pettigrew, and Rita Skeeter. Becoming an animagus isn't just learning a spell. It's a long, intricate process combining transfiguration, potions, astronomy, and sheer patience. One step alone, the wizard must carry a mandrake leaf in their mouth for an entire month, without removing it even once. One mistake, and the entire ritual starts over. The slightest misstep can lead to disaster. That's why this art is taught in secrecy, and animagi often keep their abilities hidden as their greatest secret. Number 3. The Patronus charm. A magical light against the darkness. The Patronus is one of the most beautiful and most difficult spells. It requires not only technical skill but emotional strength. Only those who can summon and hold on to their happiest memory in the presence of dementors can produce a shining guardian. And that's where the real challenge lies. Dementors drain happiness, turning the mind to ice. To find a warm spark within and ignite it into flame, that's incredibly difficult, especially in moments of pain, fear, or despair. Patronus is not just a shield, it is the reflection of the wizard's soul. That's why each one is unique, and that's why not everyone can cast it. Number 4. Occlumency and Legilimency. Welcome to the magical battlefield of minds. Legilimency, the art of reading thoughts, extracting memories, sensing emotions. Occlumency, the art of hiding them. One attacks, the other defends. But both require extraordinary mental discipline. Occlumency is especially challenging. To master it, a wizard must control every emotion. One moment of anger and the shield crumbles. One stray memory and the opponent breaks in. A wizard must not only block their thoughts, they must learn to conceal them even from themselves. Those who master these arts become nearly immune to manipulation. That's why they're so valued in intelligence, politics, and among Dark Lords. Number 5. The flight spell. Since ancient times, wizards have dreamed of one thing: to fly freely like birds, without brooms, flying carpets, or levitation charms. But until the end of the 20th century, it remained a dream, until Tom Riddle appeared. He was the first to achieve the impossible. He learned to fly unaided in his human form. The spell that allowed him to do so remains a mystery, but the effect was terrifying. He floated, glided through the air like a shadow. His movement was eerie and unnatural, just like his soul. Later, only one other wizard learned this skill, Severus Snape. That only 2 people in magical history managed this feat speaks to the spell's immense difficulty. It requires not just power, but a profound distortion of a wizard's nature, perhaps even the surrender of something human. Number 6. Fiendfyre, flame apparition. When Dumbledore disappeared in a burst of fire from the Ministry of Magic, Harry was left stunned. "He's gone!" gasped Kingsley Shacklebolt. But there was no sound of apparition, no pop, only flame, golden, warm, and alive. That was Fawkes. The Phoenix didn't just carry Dumbledore, he became the fire. It was a form of magical travel no wizard could copy. Only Fawkes could summon that flame, and only Dumbledore had earned the trust to vanish within. Fiendfyre isn't a spell, it's a bond, a connection so rare that only one wizard in history, Albus Dumbledore, ever travelled by it. To do so requires harmony with the creature's essence. Fawkes burned with rebirth, loyalty, and purity. A wizard must match that spirit, channeling fire without being consumed, becoming one with it, not commanding it. That's why no one else has done it, not even Voldemort. Fiendfyre doesn't obey. It chooses. Number 7. Nonverbal spells. In the middle of a duel, Severus Snape raised his wand, but said nothing. No words, no warning. Yet Harry was hurled backward by an invisible force. "He didn't even say anything," Harry gasped. That was Snape's signature, silent magic. Precision without a voice. Only the most skilled wizards could pull it off. Albus Dumbledore did the same, spells flicking from his wand with elegant silence, as if his thoughts alone were strong enough to shape the air. Nonverbal spells demand more than talent. They require discipline. A wizard must think the incantation with perfect clarity, pushing magic outward without sound. It's like holding a storm inside your mind and releasing only a single bolt. At Hogwarts, students didn't begin learning silent spells until 6th year, and even then, most failed. Ron grumbled, "It's like trying to shout with your brain." But for those who mastered it, silence became power. In battle, it meant surprise. In secrecy, it meant survival. And in the hands of someone like Snape, it meant you never saw the spell coming until it hit you. Number 8. Fiendfyre. Fiendfyre doesn't obey. It devours. When Vincent Crabbe unleashed it inside the Room of Requirement, the fire roared to life with a mind of its own. It rose in waves, twisting into serpents, wolves, and dragons made of living flame. "It's Fiendfyre!" Hermione screamed, terror in her voice. Not even she could stop it. The enchanted fire surged after them, incinerating everything in its path, including the horcrux of Ravenclaw's diadem. Crabbe, the one who cast it, was consumed by his own creation. There was no time for rescue, only escape. This curse isn't feared for its heat, it's feared for its will. Unlike ordinary fire, Fiendfyre spreads with intelligence, chasing victims like prey. To summon it requires enormous magical power, but to control it, that's the real test. Even skilled dark wizards often avoid it. One slip in concentration, and the flame turns on the caster. That's why it's forbidden, why it's rarely seen, and why even Lord Voldemort never used it. Because Fiendfyre doesn't serve, it destroys. Number 9. Protean charm. Hermione Granger didn't just form Dumbledore's army, she connected it. She took an ordinary galleon, enchanted it with Protean charms, and gave a copy to every member. When she changed the date and time on her coin, all the others changed too. Instantly, no owls, no parchment, just magic moving silently through metal. "It's the Protean charm," she explained to Harry. "I got the idea from the Dark Mark. You know who uses it to summon his Death Eaters." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Hermione had outsmarted the dark arts using their own methods. The Protean charm is advanced magic, far beyond NEWET level. It links identical objects across space and time so that a single change to one reflects on the rest. The caster must maintain harmony between all items, distance, number, and consistency all affect the spell's success. One slip in intention and the entire chain breaks. The message may scramble, delay, or vanish altogether. Hermione's coins never failed. That level of precision, from a fifth-year student, left even professors impressed. No one else at Hogwarts could have done it, not even among the older students. The charm demanded not just power, but mathematical clarity, emotional control, and perfect magical focus. While others were practicing shield charms, Hermione was altering the rules of communication, quietly, elegantly, and without a single mistake. The Protean charm remains one of the most difficult non-verbal enchantments ever performed by a student, and one of the most brilliant. Number 10. Vulnera sanentur, healing spell. Blood poured from Draco Malfoy's chest like a crimson river. The bathroom tiles turned slick. Harry froze, wand still raised, horrified by what Sectumsempra had done. "What have you done?" shrieked Snape as he burst into the room. He dropped to his knees beside Draco and pulled his wand. "Vulnera sanentur," he whispered. And again, his voice low and urgent, like a chant from an ancient prayer. The gashes sealed slowly. The bleeding stopped. Draco's breathing returned. The bathroom fell silent, except for Snape's strained breath. Vulnera sanentur is not a casual spell. It works in stages, first to slow the bleeding, then to mend tissue, then to knit skin. The incantation must be spoken with unwavering precision. One mistake and the wound could reopen, or turn fatal. Snape didn't just heal, he commanded the spell with absolute control. Years of experience, mastery of dark and healing magic alike, all in one moment. "There may be a great deal of blood," Snape warned before entering. He already knew what to expect, and he knew he was the only one who could fix it. This is why healing magic is feared even among trained wizards. It requires more than a wand. The caster must understand flesh and spirit, must know pain, fear, and how to untangle them. Vulnera sanentur is not just curative, it's invasive. A wrong intention can cause more damage than the wound itself. That's why only the most gifted, like Snape, ever dare to use it. Number 11, the Unbreakable Vow. When Snape took the Unbreakable Vow, the room fell silent. Narcissa Malfoy trembled as she clasped his hand. Bellatrix stood nearby, wand raised, binding their words with fire. "Will you protect Draco?" "I will." "And if he fails, will you carry out the deed?" Snape's voice was cold and steady. "I will." And just like that, the vow sealed. Silver flames wrapped around their hands, glowing for a second, then vanished. But their magic didn't vanish. It lingered, binding him to death should he break his promise. In Half-Blood Prince, this moment marked the point of no return. The Unbreakable Vow isn't a trick. It's not reversible. It's magic at its most final. There is no room for doubt. If the wizard making the promise hesitates, if his hand shakes or his will falters, the vow kills. It doesn't punish with pain. It ends life. That's why even the darkest wizards rarely use it. Not because they fear death, but because the vow removes choice. It steals the right to fail, and in magic, that's a terrifying idea. Most wizards will go their entire lives without seeing an unbreakable vow, let alone making one. It requires a third wizard to cast the magic, a binder. That person must be precise. The words, the magic, the timing, all must be exact. A slip of the tongue or the wrong intent can result in unintended death, and the magic doesn't care about good or evil. It binds the soul to its word, and if the soul breaks it, the body pays the price. Snape's vow was not just about Draco. It was about Dumbledore. It was about a plan larger than either Narcissa or Bellatrix knew. "He's made the unbreakable vow, remember?" Dumbledore once said. And so Snape became both executioner and protector. One vow, 3 lives tied together. Not even the Elder Wand could undo that kind of magic. Number 12. Metamorphmagus ability. Nymphadora Tonks stood in the middle of the Order's kitchen, her hair flickering between bright pink and mousy brown. She was angry again, angry and heartbroken, and it showed. That was the strange burden of being a Metamorphmagus. Your feelings had nowhere to hide. Born with the rare ability to change her appearance at will, Tonks didn't need spells or potions. Her magic ran in her blood, but even for her, control wasn't guaranteed. Her hair was a dull mouse, her face drawn, Harry noticed during their time at Grimmauld Place, and it wasn't just stress, it was magic unraveling under the weight of grief. Metamorphmagia isn't taught, it cannot be learned. You're either born with it or you're not, but that doesn't make it effortless. Tonks, despite having practiced since childhood, often struggled when her emotions ran high. Love, loss, exhaustion, each one pulled at the seams of her gift. When Remus Lupin left her, for her own good, the transformation failed. She couldn't fake a smile, couldn't brighten her eyes. Her magic reflected her soul. That's the curse of Metamorphmagia. Your heart is always visible. Ordinary wizards have no access to this kind of power. Even accomplished animagi like Professor McGonagall had to train for years to take a single animal form. Polyjuice Potion requires hours of brewing and a piece of someone's hair. But Tonks? She could shift her nose into a pig snout in seconds. A trick, yes, but also a testimony to something deeper. Magic beyond formulas, beyond wands, magic that's woven into who you are. "She's a Metamorphmagus," said Moody. Got it from her mother, rare thing that. But it's a fragile gift, unstable when the mind is shaken. No amount of bloodline can protect a Metamorphmagus from collapse if the soul is cracked. Tonks was powerful, skilled, loyal, and yet, in the darkest hours of her life, she couldn't hold her shape. Magic, for all its wonder, has rules. But gifts like hers, they follow the heart, and when the heart breaks, the magic does too. Number 13. Obliviate, memory charm. There is a kind of magic that does not simply summon fire or hurl a jinx across a dueling platform. It operates in silence, not through bright flashes of light, but through the hush of forgotten moments and altered realities. The spell Obliviate is one such magic, used to erase memories from the minds of witches, wizards, and muggles alike. It is deceptively simple in form and devastating in its potential. What looks on the surface like a mere flick of the wand and a whispered incantation is in truth a surgical act performed on the most delicate of instruments, the human mind. It is easy to think of Obliviate as a clean erasure, a practical tool of secrecy in the wizarding world. The statute of secrecy, after all, would be impossible to enforce without it. Magical creatures escaping into Muggle view, accidental hexes in the wrong neighborhood, these are cleaned up neatly, efficiently, by a department trained precisely for such situations. But the spell is not as precise as it may seem, and therein lies the danger. To tamper with memory is to tamper with identity. Every recollection, no matter how small, is a thread in the fabric of one's self. Remove the wrong thread, and the whole tapestry may unravel. Gilderoy Lockhart learned this too well. Once a celebrated author with a talent not for spellcasting, but for self-promotion, he boasted in Magical Me about his use of Obliviate on others. He stole not just tales, but the memories of those who lived them, turning feats of bravery into anecdotes for his books. Yet his undoing came at the tip of his own wand. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, when Lockhart attempts to use Obliviate on Harry and Ron with Ron's broken wand, the spell rebounds. His own memories vanish, swallowed in a cloud of magical error. He doesn't know who he is, Madame Pomfrey says later at St. Mungo's. The man who prided himself on reinventing himself became a shell, his past scrubbed clean by his own arrogance. Lockhart's case is a cautionary tale of what happens when a powerful spell is wielded without proper understanding. His mind, once brimming with invented tales, was reduced to a vacant smile and childlike confusion. But there are deeper, quieter uses of Obliviate, uses that do not involve personal gain but immense personal loss. Nowhere is this more hauntingly illustrated than in the actions of Hermione Granger before the breakout of the Second Wizarding War. As the shadow of Lord Voldemort stretched across Britain once again, Hermione made an unthinkable choice. To protect her parents from the Death Eaters, she did not merely hide them, she wiped away all trace of herself from their minds. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, she says, "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia." She did not simply remove a moment, a conversation, or even a day. She erased their identity as parents. She unraveled a bond formed over 17 years, and she did it knowing she might never be able to reverse it. This act was not a demonstration of magical strength alone, it was a test of emotional fortitude. Few spells demand as much from the heart as from the wand hand. Hermione's decision was made not in a classroom, but in the quiet corners of her conscience. She became both surgeon and executioner, removing herself from their minds with a precision and pain no textbook could prepare her for. It was an act of love and an act of violence. The girl who had once raised her hand in every class now wielded magic with the maturity of a hardened aura. The difficulty with Obliviate is not in the casting, but in the control. Remove too little and fragments of memory may remain distorted, confusing, dangerous. Remove too much, and the person may forget not just names and faces, but who they are, what they love, what defines them. The Ministry of Magic knows this well, which is why Obliviators, those trained to alter memory, undergo years of training. Memory is not a drawer to be opened and emptied, it is a labyrinth, and the spell must navigate its passages with extreme care. There is an eerie story recorded in the archives of the Obliviator headquarters concerning a witch named Wilma Wicks in the early 1900s. She had mistakenly used an overpowered Obliviate on a Muggle witness who had seen a dragon escape during a magical exhibition. The witness, a man named Charles Edmund, forgot not only the event, but the last 20 years of his life. His wife became a stranger to him, his children, unfamiliar names. He fled his home, wandered the countryside, and was later found in a shelter under the belief that he was a 20-year-old bachelor from Bristol. It took months of magical rehabilitation to rebuild even fragments of his former life. The records call it the Edmund Incident, and every new Obliviator studies it as a grim reminder of the cost of imprecision. The brain does not take kindly to being rewritten. Sometimes, even a successful Obliviate can leave residue, ghosts of memory, emotions with no origin. People report feelings of nostalgia for things they don't remember, or unease in places they should have never known. A young Muggle girl once saved from a rogue hippogriff in Kent continued to dream of flying for years, though her parents insisted she had never been near anything more exotic than a petting zoo. Memory is persistent. Even magic cannot always banish it entirely. Number 14, Polyjuice Potion. Of all the feats taught at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, few inspire such awe, caution, and misunderstanding as the brewing of Polyjuice Potion. Though not technically a spell, its results are so magical and potentially catastrophic that even the most accomplished young witches and wizards often fear it more than any incantation. It is a potion born of ambition, secrecy, and transformation, and its history is littered with both daring triumphs and horrifying miscalculations. Those who attempt to create it walk a perilous path, for every step must be executed with absolute precision. One wrong ingredient, one skipped day, one misjudged component, and the potion turns not into power but into punishment. The complexity of the Polyjuice Potion lies not only in its recipe but in its demands upon the brewer's character. It is not a task for the impatient. From the very first day, it requires a commitment to consistency, the kind not commonly found among teenage students. The brewing process stretches over 31 uninterrupted days, each marked by a series of tasks boiling lacewing flies for 21 days, carefully adding shredded boomslang skin, extracting essence from a knotgrass bundle, and much more. It is a ritual of patience where each ingredient plays a sacred role and the cauldron becomes both altar and crucible. J.K. Rowling does not overstate the danger of Polyjuice Potion in the Chamber of Secrets. When Hermione Granger, a student known for her academic perfectionism, decides to brew it in a girl's bathroom, albeit the disused one, haunted by moaning myrtle, she is venturing into territory even adult wizards often avoid. The very choice to do so underlines the seriousness of the situation. To uncover the truth about the heir of Slytherin, she is willing to risk not only school rules, but her physical safety. Yet, even with all her intelligence, her preparation falters at the final moment, not from laziness or ignorance, but from a single, easily overlooked error. Hermione's mistake was choosing the wrong hair. Believing it came from Millicent Bulstrode, she added it to her potion, only to discover too late that the strand belonged to Millicent's cat. The transformation that followed was grotesque, her features twisted into something inhuman. Her face was covered in black fur. Her eyes had turned yellow and there were long, pointed ears poking through her hair. The Polyjuice Potion, designed to copy human appearance, could not complete the transition when given non-human DNA. Instead of a disguise, Hermione received a transformation that nearly trapped her in a half-cat form indefinitely. That image, Hermione curled in a stall, ears twitching, fur growing thick on her skin, haunts anyone who dares to see Polyjuice Potion as merely another clever trick. It is not just an advanced potion, it is a test of respect for magical law, biology, and time. The dangers are baked into every line of the recipe, waiting to punish those who approach it casually. The Hogwarts library keeps its formula under tight control for good reason. Students are not taught it openly. It is not part of the standard curriculum. Only those with extraordinary cause or recklessness ever consider brewing it on school grounds. Even those who succeed in brewing the potion are not safe from its psychological consequences. Consider the effects it had on Harry Potter and Ron Weasley, who used the potion alongside Hermione to infiltrate Slytherin House. The experience of becoming Goyle and Crabbe was more than cosmetic. Their voices changed, their limbs grew thick, their skin paled to unfamiliar tones. They even adopted the lumbering body language of Malfoy's cronies. To walk in another's skin, even temporarily, is an unsettling experience. One must suppress their own identity, their instincts, their voice. The price of subterfuge is not only physical, it is mental and moral. What makes Polyjuice Potion especially unique is that it requires the brewers to acquire a piece of their intended form, a hair, a flake of skin, perhaps even a nail. Without it, the potion is useless, but acquiring such biological tokens often involves deceit. It turns the act of potion-making into something predatory. When Barty Crouch Jr. impersonated Mad-Eye Moody for an entire school year in the Goblet of Fire, he kept Moody imprisoned in a magical trunk, stealing hairs from his captive to maintain the disguise. It is a chilling example of how the Polyjuice Potion, in skilled but unscrupulous hands, can be used for long-term manipulation and even systemic infiltration. The ethics of the potion are as murky as its bubbling surface. Its power allows access to forbidden places, private lives, and trusted roles, but its misuse is often undetectable. How many conversations in the wizarding world have occurred between enemies disguised as allies? How many crimes have been committed with the face of an innocent? In the Deathly Hallows, 6 of Harry's friends drink the potion to become duplicates of him and help him escape from Privet Drive. The strategy works, but at a terrible cost. Mad-Eye Moody dies in the operation. The Death Eaters attack savagely, knowing that deception is in play. The potion, for all its strategic brilliance, cannot shield its users from consequences. The physical process of transformation is not smooth. It is often painful, grotesque, and disorienting. Harry felt his shoulders curve inwards, his robes rip. His voice, when he spoke, came out as a rasping croak. Rowling describes the act of turning into someone else with visceral discomfort. There is no glamour here, no quick sparkle and change. The body twists, bones stretch, voices crumble. It is closer to horror than to heroism. The cost of magic is often paid in pain, and the Polyjuice Potion exacts a heavy toll for its service. And yet, despite all of this, the potion remains an object of fascination. It represents ultimate control, the ability to wear another's life like a cloak. To a young student, it may seem like the key to power. To an adult, it can be a weapon. It erases the line between self and other. In The Cursed Child, it is again used as a tool of manipulation, allowing Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy to impersonate others and alter the course of time. The potion's continued presence in the wizarding world proves that its utility outweighs its risks, but only barely. To make Polyjuice Potion is to invoke a very specific kind of magic, not the magic of wands and spellbooks, but of discipline, deception, and transformation. Its brewing demands not just ingredients, but daily attention. Lacewing flies must be stewed exactly 21 days. Leeches must be added at the precise moment. Knotgrass, fluxweed picked at the full moon, and powdered horn of a bicorn all play critical roles. The ingredients are rare and many are controlled substances. Even acquiring them is a task that often forces the brewer to flirt with illegality. Number 15, invisibility charms, vanishing spells. In the high towers of Hogwarts Castle, where the shadows of the turrets stretch long across the courtyards and wind murmurs secrets between the ancient stone, there is a classroom where magic behaves differently. The Transfiguration classroom, under the strict and calculating gaze of Professor Minerva McGonagall, has long been the crucible of one of the most treacherous branches of magic: vanishment. To vanish something, not to disillusion it, not to create the illusion of disappearance, but to truly remove it from this realm of reality into a space neither seen nor sensed, is a task that unnerves even the brightest young minds. Disappearing spells, officially called vanishing charms, belong to the advanced curriculum in Transfiguration. As the textbooks emphasize and as Professor McGonagall never tires of repeating, Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. But within the hierarchy of Transfiguration, vanishment is perhaps the most unforgiving. Because this spell does not simply alter shape or form, it erases presence. And that concept alone is difficult to grasp even before a wand is lifted. The vanishing spell Evanesco has been taught to 5th years and above, most notably during the OWL year. And yet even among skilled students like Hermione Granger, it produced inconsistent results. It is not enough to focus on the physical object in front of you. You must also focus on where it is meant to go, though no wizard, not even Albus Dumbledore himself, can definitively explain where the vanished things end up. "They are removed from our plane," McGonagall once said, "but never truly destroyed. It is the wizard's duty to ensure they do not remain lost." The complexities lie not only in the mental discipline it demands, but in the consequences of failure. The object might resist partial vanishment, leaving behind fragments that are neither real nor touchable, phantom residues that hum with unstable energy. In 1995, when Seamus Finnegan attempted to vanish a snail during a routine lesson, the shell disappeared, but the slimy body remained, confused and shivering. It writhed on the table until McGonagall performed a restorative spell with a grim set to her lips. "You must never forget," she told the class then, "that life resists vanishment, and the spell will punish your imprecision." Even inanimate objects have their own stubbornness. Neville Longbottom once tried to vanish a stack of quills, but only succeeded in making the feathers disappear. The nibs clattered noisily to the floor. He received a B for effort and a lecture on focusing intention. "It's not about waving your wand," McGonagall remarked, "but understanding in the deepest part of your magical core what absence truly means." Absence, after all, is not a void. It is a space filled with tension, with magical currents pulling at the fabric of what was. Some students report a kind of echo after successful vanishment, a ringing in the ears or a tug in their chest, as if part of them had gone with the object. There are stories, unconfirmed and whispered after hours in the Gryffindor common room, that some objects never fully vanish but haunt the magical environment. Ghost books that flutter through the shelves of the library. Buttons that appear in students' beds long after being vanished in class. Hermione Granger naturally mastered the charm more quickly than her peers. During her 5th year, she vanished a gerbil-sized cushion with a precision that impressed even McGonagall. Yet she confessed later, in private conversations, that she never fully trusted the spell. "I always wonder where they go," she told Harry and Ron. "There's a theory it's a pocket of non-space, a kind of magical limbo, but what if it's not? What if we're just sending things somewhere else, and what if we can't get them back?" The idea of return is where the charm becomes more than technical, it becomes moral. For in order to be a master of vanishment, one must also be a master of restoration. It is not enough to make a thing disappear. The responsible wizard knows how to bring it back, whole and unchanged. Yet the reverse spell, Reverso Evanesco, is rarely taught. Too dangerous, McGonagall insists. Too likely to create contradictions in magical space. Too likely to bring something back wrong. There was once a student in the 1890s who tried to reverse a vanished silver goblet. What returned was not silver, but mercury, and it leaked through the table and poisoned 2 students before it was neutralized. These risks are not just legends. Every OWL season brings with it stories of students who miscalculate the charm's trajectory. During Harry's 5th year, a Hufflepuff named Owen Wigley vanished his inkwell, but not the ink. The entire front row was drenched in deep violet. Another girl, a Ravenclaw by the name of Laura Flint, caused her quill to vanish in a sudden burst, taking part of the desk with it. That desk remained unstable for weeks, quivering under weight like gelatin. These failures are why McGonagall approaches the charm with stern caution. Her classes on vanishment begin not with wands, but with theory. Students must read 3 chapters on magical space, study diagrams of interdimensional loops, and write essays on historical failures of the charm. Only then do they lift their wands. Only then are they permitted to try on invertebrates. And even then, the consequences of overconfidence are harsh. "Transfiguration is not to be trifled with," she said, after a Slytherin tried to vanish his own shoe. "You are not making things invisible, you are unmaking them, and unmaking, my dears, is a delicate art." The most successful practitioners of Evanesco, according to the Department of Magical Education, are those with an unusually strong sense of magical intent and ethical clarity. The spell reads your hesitation. It senses doubt, a jittery wand hand, a flicker of uncertainty in the mind, and the charm buckles under its own pressure. Magical historians have speculated that this sensitivity is what prevented Gellert Grindelwald from using vanishment as a weapon. Destruction was easy for him, but erasure was something even he could not control. Number 16, Sectumsempra. In the silent shadows of the Room of Requirement, among dust-covered cupboards and forgotten relics of past generations, the true weight of dark magic was revealed. Harry Potter, armed with the tattered potions book, once owned by the enigmatic half-blood prince, found himself at the edge of knowledge he did not fully grasp. The spell written in jagged script on a yellowing page, Sectumsempra for enemies, had no description, no warnings, just those chilling words. In the moment of desperation, facing Draco Malfoy's taunts in the bathroom of the boys' lavatory, Harry invoked the curse with no comprehension of the destruction it would unleash. What followed was not just a duel, but a lesson written in blood. Sectumsempra, a spell forged in the solitude of Severus Snape's tortured youth, was never meant for casual use. It bore the markings of a spell not taught at Hogwarts, not approved by the Ministry, and certainly not fit for a schoolboy's duel. With its roots in wrath and survival, it cut deeper than any blade. When Harry cast it, the effects were immediate and horrifying. Invisible slashes opened across Draco's body, spraying crimson across the white tile, painting the air with pain and panic. The spell did not hesitate. It did not allow adjustment or error. Its force was absolute. Severus Snape, the man who had invented it, arrived at the scene with terrifying urgency. With practiced precision and an expression caught between fury and dread, he muttered counter-curses to halt the blood loss and heal Draco's wounds. In that instant, Snape recognized the spell, not just for what it did, but for what it meant. It was his. A creation from his dark past, a sin resurrected by a boy too curious, too trusting of a book, and too unaware of what magic could cost. What makes Sectumsempra different from the curses taught in defense against the dark arts is not just its brutality, but its nature. Most spells allow the caster a level of control. They can be aimed, adjusted, even reversed. Sectumsempra, by contrast, explodes into action with no restraint. The caster may only intend to wound, but the spell does not differentiate. It does not wait for confirmation. It executes its purpose, cut, to bleed, to harm, with relentless fidelity. It is not a negotiation between wand and wizard. It is a declaration of intent that the magic fulfills without mercy. This nature makes the spell uniquely dangerous for inexperienced users. Harry had never seen it performed. He had no idea what it would do. Yet he used it, and the moment the spell struck Malfoy, the atmosphere changed. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. That line from the book encapsulates the raw savagery of Sectumsempra. There was no visible weapon, no physical contact, and yet Draco fell as though attacked by a dozen invisible blades. The pain was not theatrical, it was real, immediate, and scarring. Snape's reaction was telling. He did not ask what spell was used. He knew, his eyes, always shadowed with secrets, now burned with recognition. And perhaps guilt. Sectumsempra was his legacy, a reflection of his bitterness, his need to defend himself during those lonely years at Hogwarts. As a half-blood in a world that worshipped pure heritage, as a boy mocked for his appearance and background, Snape created the spell not for power, but for protection. Yet even he, in adulthood, chose not to use it lightly. That speaks volumes. The creator of Sectumsempra feared its use more than its invention. For Harry, the incident shattered any remaining illusion that magic was inherently noble or benign. It forced him to face the truth that magic is as dangerous as the intent behind it. A boy with good intentions could still cause great harm. He had not even known what the spell would do. He had just used it, blindly guiding on Malfoy. The regret that follows is not the regret of being caught, but of not understanding. In that bathroom, Harry crossed a threshold. He had used something dark and irreversible, and he could never pretend innocence again. What is chilling is how easily magic, when stripped of context, becomes a weapon. Harry had trusted the prince's notes because they improved his potion skills, because they made him feel clever, advanced, ahead. The same book that gave him triumph gave him torment. Sectumsempra was the price of that power. It lay hidden like a trap, waiting to teach him that magic is not just about spells and counterspells, it is about consequences. Hermione Granger had always warned against the book. Her instincts were sharper than anyone gave her credit for. She sensed that the prince's margins were not just notes, but fragments of a mind not entirely stable. She was right. The book was more than a tool. It was a relic of a young Snape's wounded soul, bleeding anger and revenge. In the end, the spell within it revealed the danger of unearned power. Harry had not earned the right to use Sectumsempra because he had not learned its burden. That burden lay with Snape alone. He had crafted the spell not to kill but to punish. In his younger years, surrounded by bullying and cruelty, he had needed something brutal enough to protect him. But magic, once released, has a will of its own. Sectumsempra took the anger of a boy and gave it form. It turned fear into violence. It turned defense into mutilation. And Snape, as an adult, bore the shame of that knowledge. That is why he snatched the book from Harry. That is why he demanded to know where it was hidden, not to punish Harry, but to prevent the spell from hurting anyone else again. Even among the unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra, Imperius, Crucio, there is a perverse clarity. They are forbidden, and everyone knows it. Sectumsempra exists in a moral grey area. It is not illegal by name because it is not known. It hides behind obscurity. And perhaps that makes it even more insidious. It is not catalogued in the ministry's registers. It is not taught in the dark arts, nor in defense. It floats in that netherworld of dangerous knowledge, born from emotion rather than intent. That makes it harder to classify and harder to avoid. The fact that Sectumsempra cannot be cast partially is another mark of its cruelty. There is no soft version, no weakened variant. It does not wound lightly. It either strikes with full force or not at all. That rigidity makes it uniquely unsuited for duels where restraint is often essential. In the hands of a seasoned fighter, it would still be a gamble. In the hands of a teenager, it's catastrophe waiting to happen. Draco Malfoy's fate could have been far worse if Snape had not arrived when he did. Harry was frozen in horror, unsure of what he had done or how to undo it. Blood was everywhere. The tile floor slick, the spell's silence was as haunting as its violence. It did not scream, it did not crackle. It simply cut, efficiently, invisibly, deeply. The scene burned itself into Harry's mind, and it remained there long after the bathroom was cleaned. Guilt is a powerful teacher. Sectumsempra left a scar not just on Draco's chest, but on Harry's conscience. It is telling that Harry never used the spell again in battle, not even against Death Eaters. He had access to one of the most effective offensive spells in magical history, and yet he abandoned it. That choice says more than any punishment Dumbledore or McGonagall could have given him. He learned that knowing a spell does not make it right to use it, and that sometimes the magic you can wield is not the magic you should. Severus Snape, for all his contradictions, never taught Sectumsempra to anyone. It was not in his curriculum, it was not passed down, it was his alone. And perhaps in that solitary silence, he tried to erase a piece of himself. The boy who needed such a weapon to survive, that's why he called himself the Half-Blood Prince in that book. It was a mask, a persona born of pain and genius. Sectumsempra was his cry for power in a world where he felt powerless. That cry echoed when Harry found the book. When he cast the spell, when he watched the blood, it echoed not because Harry was cruel, but because the spell doesn't care. Magic does not discriminate. It answers the call regardless of the hand that holds the wand. That is what makes Sectumsempra more terrifying than any unforgivable curse. It's not marked as evil. It doesn't need to be. Its actions define it. There are spells in the magical world that illuminate, heal, levitate, bind. There are spells that protect, that charm, that clean. But then there are spells like Sectumsempra. Spells that remind us that magic at its heart is just force waiting for direction. In the wrong hands, or even in innocent ones, that force can devastate. Harry's story is not unique. Others have stumbled upon forgotten spells in old books, but few carry the scars of that discovery so deeply. Sectumsempra was not taught at Hogwarts because it could never be controlled. It was not a lesson in defense, but a lesson in boundaries, in restraint, in ethics. Harry's brush with it transformed his view of power forever. He saw firsthand that magic is not good or evil. It is choice that defines the wizard, and sometimes choosing not to use a spell is the most powerful act of magic there is. Number 17. The Summoning Charm, Accio. The summoning charm, Accio, often misleads students with its deceptive simplicity. It appears to be one of the most straightforward spells in the Hogwarts curriculum. Say the incantation, point your wand, and the desired object sails gracefully into your hand. But this illusion of ease vanishes the moment a student attempts to summon something more complex than a quill or textbook from a visible corner of a room. Mastery of Accio requires more than a flick and a shout. It demands precision of mind, strength of will, and an intimate mental connection with the object in question. One of the clearest examples of the spell's complexity can be seen in the life of Harry Potter himself. In his 4th year, during the Triwizard Tournament, Accio became more than a classroom exercise. It became a matter of life and death. Faced with a fire-breathing Hungarian horntail in the first task, Harry had no time to run, hide, or strategize. He needed his firebolt broomstick, and he needed it fast, but it wasn't within sight or even within the same part of the castle. To succeed, Harry had to summon his broom from Gryffindor Tower across the vast grounds of Hogwarts and into the arena, all while dodging the gaze of a deadly dragon. The book describes this moment with urgency. He raised his wand and shouted, "Accio, firebolt!" What followed was not instant gratification. There was a tense pause. It took time, agonizing seconds, and in those seconds every factor that made the spell difficult came into play. The sheer distance, the maze of walls, rooms, and enchanted spaces the broom had to traverse, and the strength of Harry's focus. He could not afford even a flicker of doubt. He had to picture his firebolt as vividly as if it were in his hands. He had to believe it would come. This moment highlights a crucial truth. Accio is not a spell of brute magical force. It is a spell of mental clarity and magical direction. Wizards and witches who fail to summon an item often do so not because they lack magical strength, but because their minds are foggy, unfocused, or misaligned with the item they seek. The object must be summoned not merely by name, but by memory and intention. The wand must become a bridge between the witch's mind and the object's location. Anything less results in failure, or worse, the summoning of the wrong object. Professor Flitwick, who teaches charms at Hogwarts, often emphasizes this nuance in class. He tells students that conjuring the image of the object is as important as the incantation itself. One cannot simply call for my book or a cup. The mind must shape the identity of the object in vivid detail. Is it the green-spined copy of Magical Draughts and Potions with the scratched cover? Or the chipped porcelain teacup with a gold rim from the 3rd shelf in the kitchen? The magic works best when the object is singular and distinct in the mind's eye. In many ways, this makes Accio a deeply personal spell. The more connected the witch or wizard is to the object, emotionally or experientially, the easier it is to summon. That is perhaps why Harry succeeded in summoning his firebolt in the arena. It wasn't just a broom, it was his broom. It had carried him to victory in countless Quidditch matches. He knew its every curve, every glint of polished wood, every sweep of bristle. He didn't need to imagine it. It lived in his memory already. By contrast, consider Ron Weasley's experience with the charm. In their 5th year, during a chaotic moment in the Room of Requirement, Ron attempted to summon his wand from a pile of clutter after it slipped from his hand. He shouted, "Accio wand!" but nothing happened. The wand was within the same room, barely 10 feet away. But Ron's mind was clouded by panic and distraction. In that moment, he could not focus clearly enough to direct the spell. His failure was not magical, but mental. The nature of barriers also plays a significant role in the spell's success. Simple obstructions like closed doors or furniture are not usually an issue. But magical protections, enchantments, or unyielding materials can dampen the spell's reach. For example, during the Department of Mysteries battle in Order of the Phoenix, when Harry attempted to summon the prophecy orb using Accio, it did not respond. The orb was protected by enchantments to prevent theft or manipulation. In this case, the spell was perfectly cast, but the object was magically anchored. Distance is another major factor. While theoretically Accio can span vast spaces, the farther the object, the more demanding the spell becomes. It draws heavily on the caster's magical reserves. That's why most students begin by summoning nearby items, quills, ink bottles, even socks. Only with practice can they stretch the distance. By the time NUT level students are casting Accio on objects across the grounds, they've already learned to sustain long bursts of magical energy and focus. This principle also explains why Accio is rarely used to retrieve living beings. Though not technically forbidden, the spell does not respond well to animate targets. The magic becomes confused if the object resists or has a will of its own. Trying to summon a pet owl or a kneazle rarely ends well. The animal either refuses to come, veers off course, or panics in flight. Hermione Granger once warned against using Accio on Crookshanks. "You'll give him a complex," she said, half joking, but not entirely. Hermione, of course, mastered Accio early. She was precise, mentally organized, and rarely flustered. By their 6th year, she was summoning books from the top shelves of the library without even looking up from her parchment. She approached the spell with the same analytical detail as everything else, cataloguing the book's appearance, title, location, and orientation in her mind before casting. Her success serves as a reminder that magic favors the prepared mind. The spell also has emotional dimensions. There are instances where desperation enhances the power of the charm. In Deathly Hallows, when Harry and the others are escaping from Malfoy Manor, he uses Accio to summon the wands taken from them. He doesn't know exactly where they are, only that they must be somewhere in the drawing room. The urgency of the moment, the need to protect his friends and survive, seems to push the spell beyond its normal limits. The wands fly to him. It's an example of how emotional stakes can focus magical energy, creating results even when conditions are less than ideal. But such moments are rare and not dependable. Magic shaped by fear is unstable. The real mastery of Accio lies in calm, methodical practice. This is why the spell is introduced early in the Hogwarts curriculum. First years are taught to summon apples, matchboxes, and cushions, not because these objects are impressive, but because they are manageable. Each successful casting strengthens the bond between intention and execution. By 7th year, a student might summon a broomstick from 3 floors up, but only because they first spent years summoning feathers from their desks. Interestingly, Accio also has a cultural significance in the wizarding world. It is a spell of utility, convenience, and quick thinking. Auras are trained to use it to retrieve dropped weapons or yank wands from an enemy's grip. Mediwizards summon tools in the heat of triage. Even professional Quidditch players rely on it to retrieve lost equipment mid-game. The spell is so embedded in magical life that a witch without it feels almost handicapped. Yet for all its common usage, few appreciate how demanding it is to master fully. Luna Lovegood, known for her dreamy detachment, struggled with the charm in her early years. She once tried to summon a lost earring from the Ravenclaw common room while standing on the Quidditch pitch. The earring never came. She later reflected that perhaps she hadn't formed a deep enough friendship with it. Her odd phrasing aside, she was touching on a truth. The better you know the object, the better it knows you. The charm, in a strange way, recognizes that connection. Another hidden difficulty lies in phrasing. While Accio is the core of the spell, some wizards choose to include more descriptive language. Accio my charms essay, Accio Neville's remembrall, or even Accio the blue sock under the bed. These additional cues help the mind sharpen its image, but too many words can dilute the focus. The best summoners find a balance, just enough detail to guide, but not enough to confuse. It's a skill honed through repetition. The The spell also exposes a deeper truth about magic itself, that it is not merely about casting energy but about shaping thought. Accio works only when thought becomes direction, and direction becomes reality. It reveals how intertwined mind and magic truly are. Unlike hexes or jinxes, which can erupt violently even when imprecise, charms like Accio require harmony between idea and action. One cannot fake intention. One must feel it, see it, will it into motion. In many ways, learning Accio is a rite of passage for young witches and wizards. It teaches them control, discipline, and the consequences of unclear thinking. A failed summoning is rarely dangerous, but it is always disappointing. It humbles the overconfident and rewards the focused. It reflects the broader truth of magical life, that power without clarity is nothing. Even now, long after Hogwarts, those who fought in the Second Wizarding War speak of the spell with respect. Kingsley Shacklebolt reportedly used Accio to disarm a Death Eater across a crowded ministry corridor, summoning the enemy's wand to his own hand before launching a defensive shield. Molly Weasley once summoned her daughter's broken wand from the rubble of a battle site with such force that it shattered a window. These are not the acts of novices, they are the fruits of lifelong understanding. The next time a student shouts Accio across a charms classroom and frowns when nothing moves, they are not witnessing failure. They are standing at the edge of deeper magic, magic that listens to thought, responds to vision, and unfolds only to those willing to meet it halfway. Number 18. Magical protection against dark arts. In the dim, echoing halls of Hogwarts, long before the name Harry Potter echoed through its stones, the art of magical defense was already a subject wrapped in mystery, reverence, and danger. Defensive spells, unlike flashy offensive hexes, demanded more than talent or knowledge. They required the witch or wizard to confront the very nature of fear, pain, and corruption. It was no coincidence that the greatest defenders were often the most introspective, the ones who had peered into the abyss of their own souls and refused to blink. Among the most feared of the dark spells stood the unforgivable curses, and few were as insidious as the Imperius curse. When Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, placed students under its thrall in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, even Hermione Granger, brilliant and capable, struggled to resist. The Imperius curse seeped into the mind like a whisper, wrapping itself around the will until autonomy flickered out. Defending against it was not about counterspells or barriers. It was about reclaiming control from the inside, demanding a kind of mental fortitude not taught in books. Harry Potter notably began to resist it during these classroom lessons, not because he knew how, but because his very being rebelled against manipulation. "Get off me!" He remembered screaming in his mind, his body trembling as he resisted the false joy the spell imposed. Such resistance marked a deeper truth. The most powerful shields against dark magic cannot be conjured from wands alone. They require character. This is why the Cruciatus Curse presents such an impossible challenge to block with conventional magic. When Bellatrix Lestrange cast it upon Hermione at Malfoy Manor, the pain inflicted could not be halted by a single charm. No protégé spell would suffice. To defend against the Cruciatus, one must not merely raise a wand, one must forge a shield of willpower forged over years of self-control and empathy. Dumbledore once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are." Those choices, the daily rejection of cruelty, the embrace of compassion, layer upon the soul, forming a defense that is more than magical, it is moral. Few examples are as illuminating as the defensive circle used during the Battle of Hogwarts. As the protective charms, some as ancient as the castle's foundation, rose into glowing form around the school, it wasn't just the magic of Professor Flitwick or Kingsley Shacklebolt that gave them strength. It was the combined intent of hundreds, students, teachers, creatures, and spirits, all willing the walls to hold. This was no single enchantment, but a concert of power. The charm Protego Maxima woven in tandem with Fiantoduri and Repello Inimicum, created a dome that shimmered like glass, deflecting curses from the oncoming Death Eaters. It was as if the very courage of the defenders had become solid. Yet such spells are rare because they are perilous. One mistake in their construction can leave weaknesses or, worse, amplify the attack. Magical theory teaches that when warding off a dark incantation, matching magical frequency and intention is key. Misalignment results in reverberation, essentially reflecting the dark spell inward. The Order of the Phoenix knew this. In Grimmauld Place, the Fidelius charm protected their headquarters, but layered on top were enchantments that masked, redirected, and repelled. Mundungus Fletcher once failed to renew a shielding sequence correctly, and for a terrifying hour, a rift in the charm left the house vulnerable to detection. Defending against Dementors, those dreadful manifestations of despair, requires no less than a Patronus. But what most fail to understand is that the Patronus is not just a silvery animal bounding from the wand, it is the weaponized memory of joy. It is the soul's shout into the abyss. When Harry conjured his stag to protect Sirius Black and himself beside the Black Lake, it was not instinct or incantation that made it corporeal. It was the sheer force of his belief in happiness, in love, in the possibility of good. "Expecto Patronum," he had cried, not as a spell, but as a declaration of defiance against fear. And yet, the Patronus is not foolproof. In the case of Dolores Umbridge, her cat, Patronus, glowed eerily in the corridors of the ministry, not as protection, but as surveillance. The charm responds to intent, and intent, twisted by ideology, warps even the most sacred magic. What defends can also suppress. This duality lies at the heart of magical defense. It is not simply about stopping harm, but about choosing the right principles on which to base one's resistance. The training for such complex spells is rare. Not all are taught at Hogwarts, not even in new T-level defense classes. Professor McGonagall once confided to a select few that during her time as a young Aura trainee, she learned a version of the ward known as Pericrepitus Circulus, a circle of fracture. Designed to shatter dark enchantments mid-flight, it required 4 casters in perfect harmony. It had failed tragically in a field test when one wizard hesitated. The curse they tried to repel rebounded, and a comrade was lost. Since then, the Ministry restricts its instruction to elite squads only. Then there is the spell Salvum Cordis, a lesser-known enchantment practiced by healers at St. Mungo's. Not for the body, but for the soul, this magic could counteract residual effects of the Cruciatus, or even mild Imperius influence. It required the caster to empathize, to tune themselves emotionally to the victim. A broken heart could not cast it, a bitter mind could not wield it. Healing, like defending, was bound to character. One cannot ignore the role of ancient magic in this domain. Lily Potter's sacrifice is the most sacred example. She cast no spell, spoke no words, yet her choice created a magical barrier more enduring than any known incantation. Voldemort's curse rebounded not because of a shield, but because of intent, because love, given freely, became a law that even death could not cross. As Dumbledore explained, to have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever. This is why magical defense is so taxing to teach. It demands not repetition, but reflection. When Remus Lupin instructed Harry on the Patronus, he didn't begin with the wand movement. He asked, "Think of a memory." In doing so, he invoked the most dangerous yet powerful element in magical defense, emotional truth. Unlike offensive spells which thrive on adrenaline, defensive magic requires grounding, stability, and clarity of identity. Even the spell Protego, in its basic form, behaves differently depending on the caster. Snape, for example, used it with such precision that he could deflect multiple jinxes simultaneously. His inner conflict, love for Lily, loathing of himself, somehow honed his defense into a razor. In contrast, the same charm fizzled when cast by nervous second years because fear corrupts the flow of protective magic. It falters when belief falters. In the Department of Mysteries, when the Death Eaters attacked, the limits of Hogwarts instruction were revealed. The DA students, brave though they were, found themselves overwhelmed. Neville Longbottom's shield cracked under the weight of Antonin Dolohov's curse. Luna's held, barely. Only Hermione's managed to redirect a hex with any consistency. Her secret? She didn't panic. Defense is as much about temperament as it is about knowledge. There's also the controversial practice of empathic tethering, a technique rumoured to have been used by Dumbledore's army during their underground year at Hogwarts under the Carrows regime. It involved channeling a linked defence through a group. When one fell, another absorbed the blow. It required a magical bond formed through trust. When Seamus Finnegan and Dean Thomas used it during a skirmish outside the Room of Requirement, it likely saved both their lives, but when attempted by others with fractured relationships, it reportedly backfired catastrophically. Dark magic, by design, is chaotic. Defensive magic, in contrast, demands order, but not the rigid order of control. It is the order of trust, intent, and ethical grounding. Auras often say the spell is the last part of defense. First comes recognition, then moral clarity, then will. That is why the greatest defenders are often not the most powerful, but the most certain of themselves. In the archives of the Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Law Enforcement, there exists a scroll known only to senior auras, Thorn's Compass. It contains a ritual barrier against the darkest of necromantic attacks, but its activation requires confession. Each caster must reveal their deepest secret to the others. Only through that vulnerability is the protection born. Few use it for fear of exposure. Yet when deployed during the First Wizarding War, it reportedly saved an entire village from a cursed plague. The path to mastering magical defense, especially against the dark arts, is long and lined with failure, but those who persist, those like Harry, like Lupin, like Lily, show that strength in magic is not about domination. It is about the ability to stand, to hold a line, to shelter others not through force, but through resolve. In a world torn by shadows, the true protectors are those who light a candle and stand guard, not with hatred in their hearts, but with hope. Number 19. Unbreakable enchantments. In the dim, flickering candlelight of the Hogwarts Library's restricted section, nestled between a crumbling copy of Magical Metallurgy and the infamous Theories of Magical Invulnerability, lies a tattered manuscript titled Warding the Unbreakable. A study of durability, charms through the ages. Few students venture far enough into the dark shelves to find it, and even fewer possess the courage or curiosity to open its cracked spine. For within those yellowing pages is recorded the perilous, elusive magic of the unbreakable charm, a spell that tests not only the strength of a wizard's wandwork, but the very depth of their understanding of magical structure and composition. Charms of unbreakability, known in Latin incantation as indurabilis, are often misrepresented in popular magical education. Many younger witches and wizards naively believed the charm to be a simple ward of resistance, like a protego for objects. But this is a dangerous misunderstanding. Unlike shielding spells, unbreakability charms fuse magic into the very fibers of a material, reinforcing every atom with arcane energy. It's not a shield placed over the object. It is a transformation of the object itself, a reweaving of its magical blueprint. This is what makes it both powerful and unpredictable. During the 14th century, a warlock named Emeric the Enchanter famously attempted to render his battle axe unbreakable during the Goblin rebellions. He succeeded, to a fault. The axe did not splinter even when used to cleave enchanted goblin steel, but it also became impossible to repair or modify. The magic was so deeply infused that even minor transfigurations rebounded violently. According to a history of magic, one of Emeric's apprentices lost both eyebrows and half the ceiling, attempting to polish the handle with a self-cleaning charm. The axe was later sealed in a lead-lined chamber at the Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Artifacts. It still hums with latent energy. Unbreakability charms also played a lesser-known role in the Second Wizarding War. When the Order of the Phoenix began reinforcing their headquarters at No. 12, Grimold Place, it was not only the Fidelius charm they depended on. Mad-Eye Moody, ever paranoid and precise, employed layers of structural fortifications. It was Kingsley Shacklebolt, however, who proposed adding unbreakability charms to key fixtures, including the staircase railings and basement locks. In a field report preserved in the Wizengamot archives, Kingsley wrote, "Should Death Eaters breach the primary concealment, it is essential that the interior withstand more than brute force. We require something that lasts." What makes the unbreakability charm so elusive is the fine balance between the magical nature of the object and the spell's magical signature. The wand movement is deceptively simple, a slow, tight spiral from the wand tip, followed by a sharp, downward thrust. The incantation, Indurabilis, must be pronounced not loudly but firmly, and the caster must maintain constant visual contact with the object throughout. But technique alone is not enough. The spell requires an acute awareness of the object's magical conductivity, a term first introduced by Bathilda Bagshot to describe how well a material accepts and retains enchantment. For example, unicorn hair-infused parchment accepts the charm well, but dragonhide can unpredictably repel or twist the enchantment if not properly pre-treated. It is for this reason that Hogwarts' own professors treat the spell with exceptional caution. Professor Phileas Flitwick, Charms Master and one-time dueling champion, refused to include the charm in the standard curriculum. Even the most gifted 7th year, he remarked in a 1991 interview with the Daily Prophet, lacks the magical maturity to understand what they're binding. Magic has a memory. When you force too much of it into an object, it bites back. In his 32 years of teaching, he authorized only 3 students to attempt the unbreakability charm under supervision. One of them was Hermione Granger. Hermione, ever the diligent scholar, attempted the spell in her 6th year after receiving special permission from Professor McGonagall. The object: a glass phial designed to carry sensitive ingredients for the brewing of Felix Felicis. The unbreakability charm, if successful, she noted in her arithmancy thesis, would ensure that even a cauldron spill or accidental drop could not shatter the container. The spell was partially successful. The glass did not break when dropped from the astronomy tower, but it also absorbed trace residues of the Felix Felicis itself, creating bizarre magical interference. The phial, when tapped, began to glow faintly and hum a tune similar to the Hogwarts school anthem. Hermione wisely declared it an unexpected side effect of reckless spell layering. The core danger of this charm lies in precisely that, layering. When spells are stacked, such as an invisibility charm on top of a summoning ward followed by unbreakability, the result can be explosive. This occurred most famously in 1982 when a Hogwarts 3rd year named Marcus Dello attempted to enchant his school satchel with multiple enchantments at once. First, he cast a spell to make it lighter, then a basic rain-repelling charm. Finally, he attempted the unbreakability charm he had read about in curses and counter-curses, mispronouncing the incantation and reversing the spiral of his wand motion. The bag detonated. Marcus spent 2 weeks in the hospital wing and 3 months explaining his actions to the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. There are also cases when the spell works too well. A diary discovered in the attic of Malfoy Manor after the war was found to be impervious to any form of physical or magical destruction. It was bound in midnight black leather, sealed with runes even Bill Weasley couldn't decipher. Analysis by Gringotts Cursebreakers revealed a perfect unbreakability charm likely applied by a practitioner with knowledge of blood magic. The diary was empty, its pages erased, but unburnable, untearable, and, as the ministry feared, perhaps still linked to its former owner, Tom Marvolo Riddle. For now, it sits in a vault beneath the Department of Mysteries, encased in crystal. The most terrifying example of unbreakability, however, remains the horcruxes. Though not all were enchanted using standard unbreakability charms, each contained enchantments of endurance, concealment, and destruction resistance. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione hunted the locket of Salazar Slytherin, they encountered enchantments so deeply interwoven with the object's essence that even basilisk venom, one of the few substances capable of destroying a horcrux, was needed to break it. As Dumbledore told Harry in Half-Blood Prince, the very act of making a horcrux renders the object supremely resilient. It is thus no wonder that aspiring charmers are cautioned against experimenting. In 1997, an article in Witch Weekly reported a disturbing rise in student injuries linked to botched attempts at object reinforcement. The Department of Magical Education issued a formal warning: under no circumstance should young witches or wizards attempt unbreakability charms without supervision. Magical injury caused by spell rebound may result in long-term wand instability and magical inversion. Even advanced professionals approach the spell with reverence. Garrick Ollivander, the legendary wand maker, was once asked if he used unbreakability charms in wand construction. He replied with a measured tone, "Wands must bend to choose their masters. An unbreakable wand is no wand at all. Magic must flow, not be locked inside." Among magical craftsmen, the charm finds more practical, albeit dangerous, uses. Goblins at Gringotts are said to enchant their vault doors with a variant of the unbreakability charm. These are rumoured to involve layered enchantments woven with goblin silver and dragonfire. Only authorised goblin artificers know the full extent. When the Lestrange vault was breached in 1998, the door did not shatter. It twisted, melted, and burned the intruder's hands. Such enchantments resist not only destruction, but desecration, bound by intent as well as spell work. It is important to note that the spell does not render an object eternal. Rather, it makes it impervious to physical force and many magical disruptions. But time, decay, and magical entropy still claim their price. A helmet enchanted in the 1600s by a dueling knight named Godfrey of Gloucester was uncovered during an excavation near Hogsmeade. Though perfectly intact, the inner padding had rotted away, and when a young curse-breaker placed it on his head, the helmet refused to come off. It had, quite literally, become part of its own legend. There is a psychological element too. The unbreakability charm demands an unusual form of magical confidence. The caster must believe absolutely in the object's capacity to endure. Doubt fractures the enchantment before it can take hold. In her memoir, Charm Beyond Reason, Miranda Goshawk wrote, "The unbreakability charm requires the wizard to assert dominance over the fragile nature of the world. It is not an act of defense, it is an act of defiance." This may be why most wizards never master the spell. It's not merely about strength or precision, but identity, the wizard's relationship to permanence, to change, to fear. In a world where so much is uncertain, to cast such a charm is to shout into the void, "This will remain." And yet the spell remains relevant. In the age of increasing magical volatility, more families quietly inquire at Diagon Alley for reinforced family heirlooms, amulets, journals, even teacups, all candidates for preservation against the chaos of the unknown. At Borgin and Burke's, it is whispered that a hidden shelf contains objects made unbreakable by means best left undiscovered, sold only to those who do not ask questions. Unbreakability at its heart is not only a charm but a philosophy. A declaration against loss, a protest against entropy, but it is a protest that comes at a cost. Magic, like life, resists being chained. Even the most durable enchantment must one day yield, whether to time, fate, or the hand of one determined enough to undo what once was made unbreakable. Number 20. Avada Kedavra. Of all the spells whispered through the darkened corridors of wizarding history, None bears the weight of dread quite like the Avada Kedavra curse. It is not merely a spell, it is a sentence, an irreversible judgment uttered with the flick of a wand. Known as one of the 3 unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra is the most feared for a reason. It causes instant, painless death with no counter-curse. No defense, only the possibility of evasion. Yet beneath its cruel efficiency lies a terrible secret. It is not simply cast, it must be fueled. Technical recitation and wand motion are mere ritual. The true source of its power comes from within, the darkest recesses of the human soul. To utter Avada Kedavra with deadly effect, a wizard must conjure more than magic. They must summon the will to end a life. This alone makes it inaccessible to the vast majority of magical folk. Even the most learned witches and wizards who have studied dark arts in theory find themselves impotent when asked to apply them. The spell is not limited by magical power or knowledge, it is bound by morality. A single thread of hesitation is enough to unravel the curse. As Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye, Moody explained to a horrified Defense Against the Dark Arts class, "You need to mean it. You need to really want to cause pain to enjoy it." The spell's terrifying reputation has never stopped the curious from seeking to understand it. Historians of magic have long tried to track its origin, and while its linguistic roots may be debated, some trace it to Aramaic or even ancient Greek death rites, its effect has remained consistent through the centuries: green light, a rush of wind, and silence. There is no mark on the victim, no injury, no scream, only the haunting echo of the incantation. It is, in essence, pure intent transmuted into lethal energy. And therein lies its curse, on the caster as much as on the victim. Perhaps this is why so few have mastered it. Of the hundreds who fought in both wizarding wars, only a select few ever wielded Avada Kedavra with frequency or precision. Chief among them was Lord Voldemort, the name so feared it silenced rooms. Tom Riddle was not born a killer, but he was shaped into one by trauma, rejection, and an insatiable thirst for power. His first known use of Avada Kedavra occurred while still a student at Hogwarts when he murdered his father and grandparents in cold blood. That act, premeditated, emotionless, surgical, marked the beginning of his descent into irredeemable darkness. By the time he attempted to kill Harry Potter, the curse had become as natural to him as breathing. In that fateful moment in Godric's Hollow, Voldemort believed he was delivering one final, perfect strike, unquestionable, unstoppable. But Avada Kedavra met the sacrificial protection of Lily Potter's love and rebounded, shattering Voldemort's physical form and splitting his soul. The curse had worked, and yet it hadn't. That night it revealed a paradox. Even a spell rooted in absolute will can falter in the face of love. But if Voldemort represents the perfect example of one who mastered the spell, Bellatrix Lestrange is perhaps the purest expression of its chaos. She killed not out of necessity, but pleasure. Her glee in destruction was unfiltered, unhidden. At the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, she murdered Sirius Black with a flick of her wand and a gleam in her eye. Her laughter echoed through the shattered stone archway as he fell. It was not just a death, it was a performance. Bellatrix's soul was already so corroded by hate that the moral barrier most feel had long since crumbled. To her, Avada Kedavra was not an act of will, but an expression of joy. The cost of wielding the spell, however, is steep. The soul once made to kill cannot return untouched. Dumbledore warned of this subtly but consistently. He understood better than anyone that killing fractures something essential in the wizard. That Voldemort splintered his soul into horcruxes was not just an act of magical insurance, but a necessity. His spirit was already shattered by the weight of lives he had taken. With each use of Avada Kedavra, he lost something human, something sacred. This is why most wizards cannot cast it. not because they lack skill, but because they cannot bear the toll. Take Draco Malfoy, for instance. Tasked with killing Dumbledore during his 6th year, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Not even with months of pressure from Voldemort. Not even with the threat of death looming over his family. The moment arrived, the opportunity presented itself. And yet, the curse never left his lips. Draco knew the spell, but the price of using it was more than he could pay. It was Severus Snape who ultimately stepped in, speaking the words with the smooth finality of a man resigned to necessity. His soul, too, bore scars from such actions. Snape's use of the spell, though, was layered in tragedy. He killed Dumbledore not out of hate, but to protect Draco and maintain his double-agent status, and Dumbledore, dying from a cursed wound, asked for it. Yet even this merciful killing weighed heavily. "You have no idea of the remorse I feel," Snape once said, and we believe him, because even when Avada Kedavra is used with purpose, strategic or sacrificial, it tears at the soul. Then there is the curious case of Harry Potter himself, the boy who lived. A survivor not once, but twice of the killing curse. The first time, as a baby, protected by love. The second, in the Forbidden Forest, when he willingly walked to death to protect others. When Voldemort struck again, the curse hit a fragment of the Dark Lord's own soul residing in Harry, leaving the boy alive and the horcrux destroyed. This anomaly, a testament to the complex nature of Avada Kedavra, proves that while the curse is absolute, its results can still be shaped by love, sacrifice, and fate. Notably, Harry never attempted to use the killing curse himself, even when dueling Voldemort in the Great Hall. He could have. He had seen it used. He had experienced the worst of war. But in that moment, he chose Expelliarmus, disarm, not destroy. It was not naivety, it was defiance, a rejection of Voldemort's path. And that rejection was so powerful it became legend. It is perhaps the clearest example of how mastery of Avada Kedavra is not a mark of strength, but a symptom of moral failure. In contrast, characters like Molly Weasley, loving, maternal, fierce, demonstrate how one can deliver justice without succumbing to darkness. When Bellatrix threatened Ginny during the Battle of Hogwarts, Molly struck with the full fury of a mother protecting her child. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" she cried, and the duel ended with Bellatrix's death. Though the spell Molly used is not confirmed to be Avada Kedavra, its lethal outcome shocked many. But unlike the Death Eaters, her violence came from a place of love, not hatred, and that distinction matters. Even auras trained to confront dark forces rarely used the killing curse. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Nymphadora Tonks, and Mad-Eye Moody were known to favour stunning or incapacitating spells. For them, to use Avada Kedavra was to cross a line few dared. Its use was monitored by the Ministry and illegal unless authorised during wartime. The line between justice and vengeance is thin, and Avada Kedavra blurs it until it disappears. The spell's psychology is just as fascinating as its mechanics. To mean the words is not enough, the caster must feel them. That requires a letting go of fear, of guilt, of empathy. Those who wield Avada Kedavra with ease, like the Carrows or Fenrir Greyback, are often those whose sense of right and wrong has been distorted or annihilated. It is not bravery. It is absence, an emotional deadening. In effect, each time it is used, the caster must give up a little more of their humanity. And yet, there is always temptation, the idea of a quick solution, a permanent end to a problem. Even good people sometimes wonder, in moments of despair, whether the spell would provide relief. But this is the trap. Avada Kedavra is not just an act of violence. It is a spiritual poison. Once spoken, it lingers like smoke in the lungs. There is no undoing it, no forgetting the sensation. The wand may fall silent, but the heart, never does. This is why the spell is feared not only by those it targets, but by those who cast it. It is not forbidden because it is dangerous. It is forbidden because it demands the death of the self, not instantly like the victim, but gradually, insidiously, a slow erosion of conscience, a soul made hollow by repetition. The Dark Lord, in the end, was not powerful because he cast it often, but because he no longer cared. The green flash of Avada Kedavra is iconic, but more than its color, it is its silence that haunts. No blood, no cries, just cessation, a hole in the world. It is, in that sense, the ultimate expression of control, the denial of another's right to exist. And in a world of magic, where love and hope and courage often triumph, Avada Kedavra stands alone as the final, bleak choice of those who have abandoned all other paths. To learn it is to confront one's shadow. To use it is to become that shadow. And for all the books and wand lore and training, that truth remains. Avada Kedavra is not about magic. It is about choice, a choice that defines not just the moment, but the soul forever. Number 21, Morsmordre, the Dark Mark. There are spells that shimmer with elegance, like Lumos, summoning light with a flick of the wand. There are spells that thrill with their power, like Expelliarmus, simple yet iconic in duels. But there are also spells that reek of dread, whose very incantation poisons the air. Among them, Morsmordre is not merely a spell. It is a statement, a sigil, a brand upon the heavens that speaks not just of death, but of allegiance to something much darker. To cast it is to stand exposed before the world as a servant of Lord Voldemort. The spell does not cause physical harm directly, nor does it manipulate objects or spirits, yet it was among the most feared of all magical invocations during the Second Wizarding War. The night sky, once a canvas of stars, became a herald of despair when the Dark Mark appeared. It was not just an illusion. It was a magical broadcast, a haunting masterpiece woven from power, conviction, and darkness. To master Morsmordre was not an act of whimsy or education. It was a rite of passage into the inner sanctum of fear. Its first significant modern appearance came on the night of the Quidditch World Cup in 1994. Amid the revelry of international sport, chaos erupted when masked Death Eaters stormed the campgrounds, torturing muggles and spreading panic. When they vanished, they left behind something far worse than injuries. They left the Dark Mark floating above the treetops. "You know whose sign?" someone cried in horror. In truth, Voldemort was still weakened at that time, yet the very symbol of his reign was enough to reduce witches and wizards to silence. What spell can inspire such reaction? Only Morsmordre. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised under Polyjuice Potion as Mad-Eye Moody, later admitted to teaching the unforgivable curses at Hogwarts. But Morsmordre was never taught, not even whispered in those forbidden lessons. It was a spell shrouded in secrets, guarded not by legality, but by loyalty. To utter it required more than knowledge. It demanded transformation. One could not merely learn Morsmordre. One had to become the kind of witch or wizard who would choose to. In the original Latin, Morsmordre roughly translates to bite of death or mark of death. The language itself is an echo of the old world, of Roman blood magic, of ancient rites, where words carried the power to invoke gods or demons. It suggests a fusion of illusion and necromancy, but not in the traditional sense. The Dark Mark was never meant to deceive. It was designed to terrorize. The serpent, coiled through the skull, slithers not just through flesh, but through memory. What makes Morsmordre unique among spells is its magical architecture. Most illusions in the wizarding world are local and short-lived, bound to the caster's physical presence and power. The Dark Mark defies these rules. It remains in the sky for hours, sometimes longer, burning green like a poisonous aurora, visible across miles. It is not shaped by the caster's wand alone. It is amplified by ideology. It is as if the collective will of Voldemort's followers fuels its persistence, anchoring it in the sky like a psychic monument. Severus Snape, despite being a former Death Eater, never cast Morsmordre after defecting. It was not out of fear, nor lack of skill, but because doing so would have betrayed the truth of his transformation. "I was not a coward," he would have said, had he explained his actions. To cast the mark after turning away from Voldemort would be a self-betrayal, a magical regression. That alone tells us something powerful. The spell responds to allegiance as much as ability. It knows its caster. In the Deathly Hallows, when the trio returns to Hogwarts for the final battle, the sky again lights up, not with Morsmordre, but with protective enchantments and defensive wards. The absence of the dark mark in that moment is telling. The Death Eaters had abandoned pretense. The mark was no longer a message, it was history. Morsmordre had served its purpose. To strike when shadows were enough, when fear had more power than armies. Once war had begun in earnest, the mark gave way to the blade. And yet what many fail to understand is that Morsmordre is not merely cast, it is conjured from within. There is a darkness that must be awakened in the wizard before the spell takes root. It is not unlike the bond of a horcrux, though less permanent. The wand must align not only with the hand but with the heart. The mark refuses to manifest if the caster is plagued by guilt, hesitation, or doubt. It feeds on purity, not of soul, but of belief. Only a Death Eater in full surrender to the Dark Lord could wield it fully. In the Goblet of Fire, Winky the house elf is found holding the wand that had cast the spell, and her terror is palpable. "I is not doing it, sir. I's not knowing how," she squeals. And it's true. House elves, though immensely powerful in their own right, do not think like humans. They do not carry ideology, they carry obedience. The wand had been stolen, the spell cast by a human, one who understood what it meant to call darkness into the sky. The mark could not have come from one who lacked that human willingness to hate. Lucius Malfoy, a prominent Death Eater and member of Voldemort's inner circle, is presumed to have cast the mark many times. Though he maintained a facade of civility in public, Lucius was well versed in the dark arts, and the dark mark was a tool of intimidation he likely wielded without flinching. It was his signature, just as much as Voldemort's, a way to brand his crimes with impunity. And yet, after Voldemort's fall, he avoided casting it again. Even among Death Eaters, the spell demanded a price. Fear, perhaps, that the sky might look back. Rodolphus and Rabastan Lestrange, Bellatrix's kin, were another pair of loyalists who used Morsmordre as a symbol of vengeance. After Voldemort's first fall, they continued to cast it during raids, not to inspire terror alone, but to preserve the memory of the Dark Lord. In their minds, the mark was not just an illusion, it was a shrine. A magical headstone for a vision not yet dead. Their usage shows how Morsmordre was less a tool and more a prayer, a flare of fanaticism lit into the heavens. The spell's energy requirements are enormous. This is not due to its complexity in motion, but to its spiritual gravity. Just as the Patronus charm demands positive emotion, Morsmordre requires dark alignment. It drains the caster's magical reserves unless they are bolstered by anger, conviction, or cruelty. Many young Death Eaters failed to summon it fully, producing only a flicker in the sky, a half-formed skull that quickly dissipated. Only those who had truly surrendered to Voldemort's ideology could keep it burning. One could compare the spell to magical graffiti, but that would be insulting to its true nature. Graffiti is rebellious, anarchic, uncontrolled. Morsmordre is none of those things. It is controlled, surgical. It is deployed precisely, often after murder, as punctuation to a crime. The Death Eaters never used it indiscriminately. Each time it appeared, it signified more than presence. It meant that someone had died, often many. It was the sign of the Death Eaters, Lupin said. It was set over the houses of those they had murdered. This is not symbolism. It is ritual. To cast Morsmordre was to complete a ceremony, to affirm one's loyalty in blood. Voldemort did not merely allow his followers to use the spell, he demanded it. It was part of the choreography of his reign, violence followed by silence, then the mark. Those who failed to display it were seen as weak, or worse, traitorous. Thus the spell also functioned as an internal test, a crucible of fire for loyalty. Technically, the spell creates a massive projection using illusion-based magic, but no known counterspell has ever been shown in canon. The Order of the Phoenix did not dispel the mark when they encountered it. They moved quickly and left. Dumbledore himself never engages with it, and perhaps that is intentional. To fight the mark was to acknowledge it. It was better sometimes to focus on protecting the living than arguing with symbols of the dead. What is most terrifying, however, is that Morsmordre lingers, not just in the sky, but in memory. Even years after the Second War, the appearance of the Green Skull triggers fear and trauma among survivors. It is a reminder that spells, once cast, never truly die. They become stories, and stories are what magic is made of. In this way, Morsmordre transcends spellwork and enters mythology. The wand movements for Morsmordre are not recorded in any official curriculum, not in Hogwarts, not in Durmstrang, not in Beauxbaton. It is an orphan spell, passed hand to hand like a curse. It is likely that Voldemort himself refined it, and that his Death Eaters learned through direct tutelage. This makes it a tribal magic, bound not by books but by bloodlines of belief. To master it is to become part of a cult. Even in the final battle, Morsmordre did not appear, not because it was forgotten, but because it was fulfilled. The sky over Hogwarts was not blackened by illusions that night. It was filled with real fire, real death, real finality. The spell had served its purpose in the years before, when shadows were more effective than swords. Its absence was its end, and perhaps its last mercy. And so the spell remains, not in use, but in lore, a cautionary relic of a time when magic was bent not just by will, but by ideology, when the sky itself could be made to scream, when a single word could split the night open like a wound. Morsmordre is difficult not because it is advanced, but because it is evil, and true evil, as the history of wizardkind reminds us, is never just about power, it is about choice. Number 22, the Imperius Curse. Of all the spells whispered within the stone walls of Hogwarts, few carry the weight and dread of Imperio. An unforgivable curse, illegal, feared, and yet desperately alluring in its promise. The power to bend another's will, to erase their resistance and turn them into a silent echo of one's own mind, is seductive, not for its ease, but for the dark mastery it demands. It is not like Expelliarmus, swift and elegant, nor like Lumos, a gentle flicker of light. Imperio is a descent, a plunge into the recesses of another's consciousness, and only those with the willpower to fully dominate another soul can truly wield it. The spell itself, Imperio, is deceptively simple, but words are only the surface. Behind them lies the will to control, to override, to erase. It's not enough to want someone to do what you say, you must become their thoughts. Harry Potter himself, in the 4th book of the series, experiences the curse firsthand in Mad-Eye Moody's, or rather Barty Crouch Jr.'s, classroom. The moment the spell hits, Harry describes it as the most wonderful feeling, a strange lightness, a calm that replaces all worry. That is the insidious beauty of Imperio. It removes fear and replaces it with the illusion of peace. But resisting it, fighting the tide of that spell, is like swimming against a current of pure pleasure and false freedom. When Moody casts Imperio on Harry, the boy who lived hears a voice, his own voice, deep inside, screaming, objecting, refusing to bow. That resistance is rare. Moody even says, "Potter, you're made of stronger stuff than most." That internal strength is precisely what makes Imperio so difficult to master. It is a battle of wills, and some minds are fortresses rather than open fields. Controlling another person isn't about barking orders, it's about infiltrating them, silencing their thoughts, and planting your commands so deep they seem like their own. Lord Voldemort was a master of Imperio, but even he had to choose his victims wisely. He targeted the weak-willed, the frightened, the broken. Barty Crouch Sr., a man once known for his rigidity and authority, was reduced to a shell under the spell. His own son, Barty Crouch Jr., cast Imperio on him for months, keeping him locked inside his own home, walking and talking like a puppet. But even then, Crouch's will wasn't fully crushed. He managed to break free to crawl to Hogwarts and warn Dumbledore, though he died shortly after. This fragment of rebellion proves just how volatile and difficult Imperio can be, even in the hands of a skilled and determined wizard. The mind is a complex landscape, full of hidden rooms, locked doors, and shifting corridors. To use Imperio effectively, the caster must navigate that landscape with surgical precision. It's not about brute force, it's about subtlety. Control that is too harsh snaps the victim into awareness. Control that is too soft allows their own thoughts to slip through. The best use of Imperio feels to the victim like nothing at all, like a dream from which they see no need to awaken. The mental cost to the caster is often ignored. Those who dominate others for extended periods report symptoms of disorientation, fatigue, even depression. It's as though the minds they touch leave traces, ghosts that follow them. The Dark Lord, for all his power, was often described as isolated, withdrawn, increasingly inhuman. Perhaps that was the price he paid, to reach into others so deeply that he forgot the shape of his own thoughts. In the Department of Mysteries, during the battle at the Ministry, several Death Eaters are seen using Imperio and other unforgivable curses freely. But their control is often short-lived. Victims stumble, hesitate, resist. It takes more than a quick flick of the wand. Each command is a renewal of dominance, a fresh injection of willpower. Constant concentration is required, making it impractical in chaotic battle. That's why few use it in open warfare. It's a tool of control, not combat. Consider the case of Pius Thickness, a high-ranking official in the Ministry who was placed under Imperio during Voldemort's silent takeover. The Death Eaters needed someone in power, someone who would act decisively and without suspicion. Thickness followed every order, sacked Muggle-born employees, passed decrees, spread fear. And yet, even he was not immune to suspicion. Those who knew him noticed subtle changes, stiffness in conversation, a mechanical look in the eyes, hesitation before answers. The best puppets still have strings. Wizards like Bellatrix Lestrange preferred Crucio, the curse of pain. But even she acknowledged the value of Imperio, calling it the true test of dominance. Pain can break bodies, but control breaks spirits. And for some, that is a far more satisfying victory. To look into the eyes of your victim and see compliance, not from understanding but from annihilation of self, that is what Imperio offers to those who dare to wield it. There are stories hidden in the corners of the wizarding world of families torn apart by the curse. A father who returned home from war with dead eyes, suddenly kind and helpful, but with none of his old fire. A daughter who stopped laughing, who answered every question with a smile too smooth. Aurors know these signs, they are trained to test for them. But sometimes Imperio is too well cast. The victim disappears into their own skin, never knowing they were controlled, only sensing something is missing, like waking up after years of sleep. For all its horror, Imperio has also been used in desperate times. During the First Wizarding War, there were rumors, never confirmed, that the Order of the Phoenix used it once. A spy needed to get through a Death Eater stronghold. He was too weak to resist Veritaserum. The only way was to allow himself to be controlled by someone trustworthy, to suppress his own thoughts. The ethical debate raged for years. Is it still wrong if it saves lives? But the spell doesn't distinguish between noble and evil intentions. It only knows power, and it always takes more than it gives. The teaching of Imperio was once forbidden even in theory. But after the rise of Voldemort, Dumbledore allowed Moody, Crouch Jr., to demonstrate it on students, not to encourage its use, but to prepare them. "You need to know what it feels like," he insisted. "You need to know how to fight it. Indeed, resistance is possible. Harry's defiance proves that, but few possess such inner strength, and even fewer can teach others to find it." In a twisted irony, some wizards tried to train themselves to resist Imperio by allowing trusted friends to cast it on them in controlled environments. This practice, called willing override, was eventually banned. It proved too dangerous. Some never fully regained themselves. The curse leaves fingerprints on the mind, subtle but lasting. Even after the control is lifted, victims report strange dreams, phantom voices, doubts about whether their thoughts are truly their own. What separates Imperio from other spells is its intimacy. Avada Kedavra kills, Crucio tortures, but Imperio invades. It lives inside the mind, whispers through nerves and muscle, uses your own voice against you. The greatest danger is not during the spell but after. Those under Imperio may commit crimes, betray friends, even murder. And when it's over, they are the ones left with the guilt. The law absolves them, but their memories do not. Rufus Scrimgeour once remarked, "There are worse things than death." Perhaps he was thinking of Imperio, of waking up one day and realizing you've lived someone else's life for months. The wizarding world has laws, but laws are not shields. In the shadows, Imperio remains a weapon of choice for those who prefer silence over blood, obedience over chaos. It is not a spell for beginners, nor is it one that even seasoned witches and wizards can wield lightly. It demands constant emotional suppression, a hardening of the soul. The more you use it, the more you must disconnect from empathy, from care. Over time, those who rely on Imperio become distant, less human, like mirrors that reflect no light, only the shapes around them. In trying to erase others, they erase themselves. Alastor Moody, real or fake, was right to show the students, because knowing Imperio is the first step in resisting it, and knowing how it works reveals its weaknesses. It can be broken. Not always, not easily, but it can. All it takes is a spark inside the mind of the victim, a question, a doubt, a scream that says, "This is not me." In that moment of doubt, control slips. The spell fractures, and the caster, no matter how powerful, is left staring at a soul they could not fully own. That is the true risk of Imperio. Not that it fails, but that it shows you just how much you are willing to erase another to feel strong. And once you know that, it never leaves you. Number 23, Salvio Hexia, Concealment Charms. There are spells that light the tip of a wand or send a jolt of disarming energy through the air, charming in their simplicity, learned by every Hogwarts student by their second year. And then there are spells like Salvio Hexia. Whispers of its power float through the pages of magical theory books, spoken of with a kind of reverence, usually reserved for ancient enchantments and magical architecture. It is not a spell one casts casually, nor is it something that can be learned overnight. It is a part of a greater web, a symphony of protection, deception, and magical fusion that can make entire castles vanish from the eyes of enemies. When Hermione Granger cast Salvio Hexia in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, she was not performing a simple spell. She was initiating a thread in a delicate tapestry, a web of interlocking enchantments meant to shield her, Harry, and Ron from detection. "I've set up protective enchantments around us," she said briskly after performing the spell alongside others, like Repello Muggletum, Muffliato, and Protego Totalum. And with that, the trio melted into the landscape, visible to none, even those with magical eyes. But what the book hints at, only briefly, is the immense difficulty and intellectual strain that goes into casting such enchantments. Salvio Hexia, despite its short name, is not a solo act. It is a supporting player in a grander performance, one that requires not just magical strength, but a deep understanding of magical flow. Where spells overlap, how they amplify or cancel each other, and how to tether one's magical output over a duration that can span days. The charm's core function is simple: camouflage through illusion and magical redirection. It does not create physical barriers, nor does it attack intruders. Instead, it manipulates perception itself, making an entire area appear empty or unremarkable. What's most extraordinary is that this illusion works even on wizards. Where a hut might stand, Salvio Hexia can conjure the impression of an empty glade. Where rebels sleep, it presents the tranquil illusion of an abandoned clearing. And yet, the spell does nothing on its own. Left alone, Salvio Hexia is like paint without a canvas. It must be woven tightly with other protective enchantments: Repello Inimicum, which pushes back enemies; Muffliato, which conceals sound; Confundus, which triggers disorientation; Protego Totalum, a generalized shielding charm. The order matters, the intensity matters, the caster's emotional and magical stability matters. It is a feat of invisible architecture. During the Second Wizarding War, the Order of the Phoenix relied heavily on such enchantments. It wasn't enough to hide in basements or use disillusionment charms. The Death Eaters were skilled trackers. They used dark magic, blood rituals, and enchanted items to seek out rebels. In response, the Resistance turned to the most intricate spellwork of the modern magical world, and Salvio Hexia was at the center of this counter-offensive. When Bill and Fleur hosted their secret wedding at Shell Cottage, their home was protected not only by a Fidelius charm, but also an overlapping weave of protective enchantments. Bill, a cursebreaker by profession, understood the ancient Egyptian concept of magical grids, ley lines of energy that, when harnessed correctly, could reinforce or destabilize a charm's structure. He and Fleur spent weeks calculating the flow of magical forces in and around the property, setting anchor points and thresholds. At sunrise each morning, they renewed the spells, fearing that a single lapse could lead the Death Eaters directly to their door. That is the cost of Salvio Hexia. It is not fire and forget magic. It is maintenance, recalibration, and alertness. The charm must be reapplied daily in hostile environments, especially when magical interference, either from enemy spells or natural magical currents, causes distortion in the illusion. And when that happens, the entire enchantment series can collapse. A single misstep in sequencing, one failed incantation, and the protection frays like worn thread. Enemies see light where there should be darkness, movement where there should be stillness. The most vivid demonstration of this occurred during the occupation of Hogwarts in 1997. After Severus Snape became headmaster, a group of surviving professors and students used the Room of Requirement as a headquarters. But outside the castle, groups of fleeing Muggleborns and resistors sought shelter in safe houses hidden by enchantments like Salvio Hexia. One such group, led by Ted Tonks and Dirk Cresswell, was betrayed when an inexperienced witch failed to complete the protection matrix. The Salvio Hexia charm was cast, but without Confundus to disorient magical pursuers or Repello Inimicum to drive them back. The veil of invisibility flickered just enough for a snatcher to catch a glimpse. Hermione once referred to the spellwork as layered masking. She had read about it in Magical Defenses for the Modern Wizard, a dense volume detailing how even simple charms could become powerful when applied in the right combinations. The trick was not raw magical force, but balance and timing. Casting Salvio Hexia was less like building a wall and more like weaving a veil. And like all weavings, it was susceptible to unraveling from the smallest tear. The Hogwarts founders understood this principle. Rowena Ravenclaw, in particular, was said to have experimented with early versions of camouflaging charms. According to Hogwarts, a history, she crafted illusion spells to hide sections of the castle's library, fearing that unworthy students might stumble upon dangerous knowledge. These ancient precursors to Salvio Hexia were volatile and exhausting to maintain. One scholar, Archibald Greaves, later theorized that it was Ravenclaw's overuse of mind-taxing illusion magic that led to her early decline in health. Even more fascinating is the role of magical resonance. Every witch or wizard has a unique magical signature, a kind of fingerprint. When a team of wizards works together to cast Salvio Hexia and its companion spells, their magic must synchronize or the charm fails. During the Battle of the Seven Potters, Mad-Eye Moody insisted on practicing synchronized spellcasting drills. If your rhythm is off by a second, he warned, you're throwing raw sparks into the wind. It's no coincidence that the group's strongest protections were maintained by witches and wizards who trusted one another completely. Another danger lies in magical fatigue. The charm, particularly when sustained across large terrains, drains the magical core like a siphon. Wizards who attempt to maintain it for too long without rest often suffer from confusion, hallucinations, or even magical whiplash, a rebound effect in which one's own energy lashes back due to unstable enchantment grids. One recorded case in the Department of Mysteries involved an unspeakable who blacked out after holding a camouflaging perimeter for 36 hours straight. When she awoke, she had forgotten her own name for a week. The use of Salvio Hexia was further refined by resistance groups like Dumbledore's army. Neville Longbottom, after taking leadership of the students inside Hogwarts, trained himself in rudimentary architectural charm work. With the help of the Grey Lady's whispered knowledge, he managed to conceal escape tunnels using a combination of Salvio Hexia, Confundus, and clever brickwork illusions. They never even knew we had a way out, he would later recall. It wasn't brute strength that hid them, it was calculation, subtlety, and discipline. One cannot help but compare Salvio Hexia to the Fidelius charm. Both hide secrets, both bend perception, but where Fidelius requires a single secret keeper and works on a binary know-don't know axis, Salvio Hexia manipulates active perception. It's the difference between locking a diary and making the diary invisible while lying in plain sight. In many ways, it is more elegant and also more fragile. Magical cartographers from the Department of Magical Transportation have long known that entire villages like Ilfracombe and Dufftown were temporarily hidden using these charms during times of crisis. The spells were drawn onto maps with golden ink, anchoring protection fields to ley nodes beneath the earth. To this day, enchanted maps of Britain used by the Aura Office show ghost-like traces where these protections once stood, echoes of ancient spellwork that remain like dust over old footprints. Even now, few can cast Salvio Hexia effectively without formal training. It is taught only at Newt level defense against the dark arts, and even then, as part of a broader discipline called magical fieldcraft, the study of stealth magic, perception, disruption, and survival enchantments. Auras, unspeakables, and magical naturalists are among the few who practice it regularly. For others, the spell is theory, not action. Perhaps most haunting is the psychological weight it places on the caster. To make something invisible is to take responsibility for what it hides. It is to live in constant awareness that protection, once offered, must be sustained. There is no rest when one's safety depends on uninterrupted illusion. "You can never relax," wrote Bathilda Bagshot in a forgotten essay. "Even as you eat, your mind remains tethered to the spell, like a marionette string connecting your soul to a shield of lies." Magic, for all its wonder, demands sacrifice, and Salvio Hexia, with its grace and its silence, is one of the most demanding spells in the wizarding world, a masterpiece not of fire and power, but of vigilance, patience, and the quiet courage to disappear. Number 24. Living Creature Transfiguration. Of all the magical disciplines taught at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Transfiguration stands apart as one of the most demanding and dangerous. At its core lies the idea of altering the form and nature of an object or creature. While the transformation of inanimate objects, such as turning a matchstick into a needle, may seem straightforward, the transfiguration of living beings inhabits an entirely different dimension. It is not only a technical challenge, but a moral, ethical, and philosophical one. The very soul of magic, the line between creation and destruction, seems to shimmer dangerously thin when a wizard attempts to rework the structure of life itself. Among all the branches of transfiguration, the metamorphosis of living creatures is held in utmost reverence and caution, a territory reserved only for the most gifted and disciplined minds. Minerva McGonagall, the stern and sharp-eyed deputy headmistress, is one of the most accomplished living transfigurists. Her command over the field is nothing short of legendary. When she transforms into her Animagus form, a sleek tabby cat with square spectacle markings around her eyes, it is more than a demonstration of talent. It is an embodiment of the trust the magical world places in the rare few who dare to manipulate the delicate strings of biological transformation. As described in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, a cat reading a map, it was sitting on the wall. It looked at him with eyes that were definitely not a cat's. These are the earliest signs Harry sees of the magical complexity concealed within the ordinary. And they are just the surface. Turning a beetle into a button might look harmless in a classroom setting, but the implications behind that spell are immense. It requires the caster to not only override the biological structure of the beetle, but also silence its life force without harming it, and then reverse the spell seamlessly to return the creature to its original form. A miscast can easily result in irreversible damage. Limbs may reappear in the wrong place, or worse, consciousness might not return. Transfiguring something living means dealing not with static matter, but with evolving, resisting breathing forces. A misstep, and the result is more akin to a curse than a transformation. There are haunting stories whispered in the halls of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. One case in particular, often cited in advanced textbooks, involved a 7th-year student at Durmstrang Institute who attempted to turn a ferret into a bouquet of roses as part of a transfiguration project. The spell backfired, leaving the poor creature in a half-state, writhing petals attached to soft fur, with a twitching nose in the center of the bloom. The student was expelled, the ferret mercifully euthanized, and the ministry issued new restrictions on the education of transfigurative arts involving sentient beings. McGonagall, despite her fierce composure, has always been clear with her students about the limits of what should be done, not just what can be done. During Harry's 3rd year, she emphasized the importance of understanding not only the spell work, but the anatomy and emotional core of the creature. Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts, she told her class. Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back. Her warning was more than an attempt to maintain order. It was a direct acknowledgement of how easily one could damage something irreplaceable. The intricacies of bodily composition are daunting enough, but magical transformation demands even more, a deep grasp of neurological function, metaphysical essence, and the very energy that sustains life. When turning a desk into a pig, for example, the wizard must temporarily generate organs, bones, instincts, and behaviors, yet the creature is not truly alive, only mimicking the appearance and motion of life. But to take a living pig and transfigure it into a writing desk is to suppress a conscious force, and therein lies the deepest danger. What happens to the consciousness of that pig? Where does it go during its inanimate existence? These are not questions with easy answers. There is a widely debated case that still lingers in the archives of the Wizengamot, the Alderton trial. In the late 1800s, a wizard named Elias Alderton was accused of attempting to transfigure his house elf into a broomstick, a cruel punishment following disobedience. The transformation was crude and incomplete. The resulting object functioned as neither elf nor broom, and the victim perished. The case was one of the first in which the ethical boundaries of transfiguration were legally defined. It reinforced the idea that using transfiguration as a tool of coercion or punishment, especially against sentient creatures, was a crime. The wizard was imprisoned for life in Azkaban, and the court issued the Declaration of Essential Magical Sentience to protect magical beings from misuse. In more controlled environments, transformations of this kind serve educational purposes, but only at the highest level. When McGonagall turned a bird into a water goblet, the fluidity and precision with which she did so mesmerized her students. The transformation involved not only changing feathers to glass and claws to a stem, but also reducing a complex skeletal and muscular system to a unified crystalline structure. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the description is brief but telling. Professor McGonagall had turned her desk into a pig and back again. This is a glimpse into the level of mastery needed. The act may appear instantaneous, but in truth it requires countless hours of preparation and inner control. A mistake made in a living transfiguration spell often results in permanent maiming. There are records of students who tried to turn rats into ink pots only to end up with twitching inkwells, some still squeaking in pain. Magical law requires that any such error be reported immediately to the Magical Reversal Squad, which can attempt to undo the spell. Still, even they admit that once the soul of the creature is fractured through transformation, there's no guarantee it can be restored. Animagi are the purest example of what successful transfiguration of a living being looks like, but even here, the path is perilous. The process of becoming an animagus involves years of training, a deep connection to one's magical core, and the ability to maintain human consciousness within a non-human form. According to the Animagus registry, only 7 new animagi have been recorded in the past 50 years. The transformation must be exact, too shallow, and the caster risks being stuck in an intermediate form, too deep, and they lose their sense of self. This danger is why illegal animagi like Sirius Black was so hard to detect. His transformation into a massive black dog was flawless, despite being unregistered. The Marauder's story reveals how rare talent and recklessness can intertwine. James Potter, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew became animagi to accompany their friend Remus Lupin during his monthly transformations into a werewolf. They succeeded where many would have perished, but the risk they took was enormous. One misstep in their spellcraft and their minds could have been trapped inside their animal forms forever. The most chilling example of this comes from the tale of Lisette Noire, a French witch who attempted animagus transformation without proper training. She became a hawk, but never changed back. Her body was lost to time, and only the hawk remains circling the cliffs of Normandy to this day. Beyond the technical dangers lies a deeper question. Should wizards be allowed to transform living creatures at all? Magical ethicists such as Bathilda Bagshot argued that any act of transfiguration upon a sentient being violates the principle of magical dignity. In her seminal work, A History of Magic, she writes, "To alter the shape of life is to challenge the natural order. Magic may make it possible, but morality must decide whether it should." This philosophy is why the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures keeps a close watch on transfiguration research. In the case of Polyjuice Potion, another method of altering appearance through magical means, the spell work is not technically transfiguration, yet it bears similar ethical complexities. Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, used the potion for nearly a year to impersonate a Hogwarts professor. Though the method differed, the core idea remained. magical manipulation of a living being's outward identity. It is no coincidence that McGonagall, despite her skill, never encourages experimentation with human transformation in class. The taboo is too great, the consequences too severe. Nevertheless, the magic persists, growing in secret corners and minds bold enough to challenge its limits. Some speculate that he who mustn't be named experimented with transfiguration in his early years at Hogwarts, seeking immortality through the reshaping of flesh. Though there is no proof, the twisted forms of the inferi and the corrupted body he returned with speak to some dark manipulation of the living form. It remains a cautionary tale for those who seek to master what should only be understood.